Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Morgan. Today we're going to be talking about my favorite composting method, or I should say one of many favorite composting methods because I love composting. But this one is definitely the fastest, and it's awesome if you live in a apartment or a shared living situation because there's no smell and it's fast, so it's awesome. I'm gonna first go over exactly what Bokashi composting is, and I'm going to use handy dandy Wikipedia because I'm not a sciencey person. I shouldn't say that because I don't want to put limits on myself, but it's not my favorite subject, so I am going to use this as a guide just to make sure I'm giving you all the information correct. So what exactly is Bokashi composting? So traditional composting is a little bit different than Bokashi composting because Bokashi composting uses fermentation. So fermentation is a little bit different because instead of using heat, it uses a outside substance. So in Bokashi composting, there is an inoculation with an organic matter, and that organic matter or that substance is lactobacilli. And so what lactobacilli does is it converts the carbohydrates using fermentation. So basically what happens is you put your food scraps in a bin, you add this compound, and it ferments for several weeks. So the other important thing about Bokashi compost is that it ferments anaerobically, to make sure I got that right, which means it ferments without air. So it needs to be in an airtight container or it will not ferment properly. So they make specific Bokashi composting containers. You can also make your own using 5-gallon buckets. There's tons of DIYs and stuff on YouTube or Google, I'm sure, but I have a Bokashi composting bin that I got on Facebook Marketplace, so that's a great option. So basically what you do is you put your food scraps in the bin and you put a layer of food scraps in the bin and put this lactobacilli. You can buy it online. I've also seen people say that you can get it from like breweries, and it's like it's a waste product that breweries have during the beer making process, and you can buy it from them. I don't know of a place locally that sells it, so if you know of somewhere in your area, like, let me know down below. I will link the place that I have bought mine in the past, and it's a local, it's not local, but it's like a smaller farm, not just like buying it off Amazon, which you can also do that, but it's always good to try to support smaller businesses and smaller farms. So anyways, so all you do is you put your food scraps in, you add this, it's kind of looks like almost like wheat bran cereal, and you add that, you mix it up a little bit, and you close the lid. And you kind of want to work fast because you don't want to let a lot of air in, but the other main important thing is that you smash it down a little bit. And I will show a video of this process as well. I'll either lay it over right here or I'll show you after, depending on how I decide to edit this. But anyways, so you just do that until the bucket's full, and you just do food scraps, bran, food scraps, bran, and you just keep going until your bucket's full. Put the lid on and you wait 2 weeks. So my Bokashi bin has a little spout on the bottom and it has a tray with holes in it, so any liquid will come down and pool at the bottom, and you can remove that liquid and you can use it as a liquid fertilizer in your garden. So you just mix it with water and water your garden. So that's one way you get basically instant liquid fertilizer, which is awesome. That's a free resource you just got from your food scraps. And the other thing you can do is, well, the other thing you should do is you wait 2 weeks, and then you take your food scraps and you dig a very deep hole and you bury them. So, and you're like, wait, I live in an apartment, how am I supposed to do that? Don't worry, I won't forget about you. I will explain in a second. But you dig a hole, you bury it, cover it with dirt, and you wait about 2 weeks and your compost is ready. So total time from when you fill up your bucket, because it might take a week or two or several weeks to fill your bucket, but from the time you put your last food scraps in, put the lid on, it's 4 weeks until you have ready compost. So that is a very short time to get ready compost. And you might be thinking that's kind of a long time, but if you've ever composted outside, it takes a lot longer than that. There are of course faster ways to compost, like vermicompost and things like that, but this is a large amount of compost that you're getting, and there's also some great pros which I will get into in a moment. So yeah, you put your compost in the ground, cover it with dirt. 2 weeks later, you have compost. So there are a few options of how you can do this. If you have a garden that you want to plant in, and a great time to do this is, you know, about a month before the growing season starts, because then it's perfect time for you to get your plants in the ground. So you can bury it directly in like a raised garden bed or in an in-ground bed. The key is you want to make sure it's totally covered with dirt to avoid any animals digging it up or things like that. You know, it's food, so some animals might be attracted to it. So you just want to make sure it's buried completely. I buried mine this time in a garden bed on legs, so it had about 3 inches of soil on top, and then I went ahead and put like a old garden bag on top of it with a rock on it, but nothing tried to get into it, so that's good. And I've never had anything dig up any of my Bokashi compost. I've also buried it in my raised bed. I will say, if you live somewhere like I do where the ground is basically rocks and clay soil, it's not ideal to bury it in the ground, just because digging a hole in the ground here is basically impossible. So but if you live somewhere with, you know, sandy soil or something like that, it could be a great option to just bury it, and then you can dig it up and use it in your garden. I like to put it directly in my garden because then it's like done. I don't have to go dig it and move it again. Now if you live in an apartment and you have like, or a condo or something, and you have a container garden and you don't have an in-ground garden, what I used to do when I lived in an apartment was I used a large tote with a lid, and I would put dirt in it, fill it with dirt, not all the way full, but probably like 3/4 of the way full, with garden soil or whatever, and then I would just bury it in there, you know, cover it, make sure it's fully covered, and let that sit in a protected area. I mean, it doesn't even really have to be protected. It can be on your patio, but if you have, you know, rats or something in your city, I would probably be a little more cautious and make sure it has snaps, just to make sure nothing gets in it, you know. So but then after 2 weeks, you can move that dirt and compost into your container gardens, or you can give it to a friend or family who has a garden. The other option is, obviously, if you have a friend or family in your area that has a garden, it's a really easy way to, you know, keep a lot of compost at your house. When I used to live in an apartment, I would take my compost a couple times a week to someone's compost and drop it. So this is a really awesome solution because you can collect your food scraps for many weeks, maybe even a month. There's no smell at all, it's totally contained, and then you could take it and bury it in one of your friends' gardens, because that way you don't have to take it over twice a week, worry about it stinking, I know some people keep it in the freezer and it takes up freezer space. So this is a super awesome option. Even if you don't have space to use the compost on your own, if you do know someone with a garden, then it's a great option. So that's what I would do if I was in an apartment, and that's what I used to do when I did live in an apartment. So yeah, so I'm gonna go into the pros and cons really quickly, and then I will show you the whole process from start to finish, and yeah, that will be the video. So the pros of Bokashi Compost, which I've already kind of listed, are there's very little smell. I would say the only time it smells is when you're burying it, and like when you open it. So it does have a smell, but when I say no smell, I mean like it's not like you're sitting in your kitchen and you can smell it. When the lid is on, as long as it's fully sealed, you will not smell it. I used to keep it under the kitchen sink, now I keep it in my pantry. No smell at all. Of course, it does smell when you open it, but you try to go fast, dump your food scraps, bury it, you know, put the lid back on. So that's an awesome benefit of it, because as you know, countertop compost bins, you know, even after 2 days you start to be like, oh, what's that? What does that smell? So sorry. Okay, number 2 is that it's super fast. So like I said, it's the fastest composting method that I've ever done or I know of. It's way faster than like my tumble composter. It's way faster than like a pile of compost because it uses fermentation instead of heat. So that's a huge benefit, especially when you're trying to garden and you know it takes a long time to make your own compost and buying compost is expensive. So making your own is awesome, and this is a really fast way to do it. Number 3 would have to be, oh, I know, this is my favorite one. You can put cooked food and salty foods and baked goods. You can put whatever food you want in your Bokashi compost. So if you know anything about traditional composting, you know there's a lot of limitations for things you can put in your compost. You can't put things that have oil on them or salt, especially maybe salt is fine in like a regular compost, but in your vermicompost with your worms, you cannot put anything salty, can't put anything oil. You can basically only put raw fruits and veggie scraps in your vermicompost. In your tumble compost, you can get away with a little bit more, but you want to be careful not to grow bacteria in your compost that you don't want in there. So the great thing about Bokashi compost is that you can put things like meat, which I don't eat meat, but if you do, you can put meat in there. You can put things with salt. You can put things with oil. Leftovers that have gone bad, you can put in there. The one thing you don't want to put in there is things that are like already really moldy or rancid, because you don't want to introduce any kind of already live bacteria. So if you have, say, leftovers that have mold on them, I would go ahead and skip that. I would not put that in my Bokashi compost. But if it's like, okay, I don't really want to eat this, but it's not like moldy, I put it in. That's just my personal thing. Maybe I'm risking it a little bit, but I've never had an issue with like bacteria growth or anything like that. So besides the good bacteria. So those are the 3 main reasons I love Bokashi composting. I'll go ahead and tell you a few reasons I don't love it. The first one would be that it's definitely a little more labor intensive when it comes to, you know, having to bury it and do the timing and things. So with my tumbler, I just throw it in there, throw leaves in there, throw food scraps in there, turn it, and then eventually it will turn to compost and I can use it whenever I want. The Bokashi composting, you do have to bury it, but I guess at the end of the day you have to move your compost from your tumbler into your garden, so I guess it probably all ends up being the same amount of work, but it is kind of annoying to have to bury it. That's just maybe me being lazy. The other reason I don't love Bokashi compost is because there's a plane. You have to have, sorry. Okay. Okay, so you have to have a place to bury it, and this has been my biggest barrier when it comes to Bokashi composting. So even though I do have a garden, I have multiple garden beds, a lot of times they're all full. I mean, most of the time they're all full because I want to grow plants, but unfortunately you do need a space to bury your Bokashi compost. So if you live in like with a big yard, or you live somewhere where it's easy to dig in the dirt, I think this would be no problem at all. But if you do have limited space to bury it, that would be my top downfall, because I didn't even do it over the summer at all because my garden was totally full. I wouldn't have had anywhere to put it. And I just now did my first batch in about 6 months, and I ended up having to remove some plants that weren't quite ready, but it was fine. I wanted to get it in there, and I wanted to get it ready for the next planting. So that would be the biggest con. And then the other con is, I said it doesn't smell, and then I'm gonna say it does smell. So it does smell a little bit, you know, of course when you're burying it, it's kind of gross because it's food scraps. I guess that's why I would say I'd like the tumble composter, because you throw it in there, you kind of forget about it, and then once you're ready to use it, it's already made into compost. Whereas the Bokashi compost, you do have to handle it while it's kind of at the middle phase of composting. So it's fermented, but now it needs to break down, so the food scraps will still be whole when you bury them. A few like random things I will say, just to be a little more successful, is, you know, if you want it to break down faster, you need to cut it up a little bit. So if you're putting like a whole half a watermelon rind in there, first of all, it's gonna take up a lot of space, so it's kind of silly. But if you cut it up smaller, the Bokashi bran will touch more parts of the watermelon and will help it ferment. So I would just say make sure you're not throwing like huge pieces of food in there. You don't have to cut it up like teeny tiny, but you know, couple inch slices is probably big enough. I mean, I mostly put like peels in there, banana peels, onion skins, things like that. I've put like half lemons in there and they've broken down fine. I will show you in a second how my final compost turned out, and I'll show you the things that didn't break down after the 2 weeks, but pretty typical things. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. I'm going to show you the process from start to finish, and that's pretty much. Alright, so the first thing you're going to want to do with your Bokashi compost is you're going to want to wash it out. I don't use any kind of soap or anything in mine because I just don't want to throw off any of the microbes or anything, so I just rinse it with water and I let it dry out in the sun. So as you can see, my Bokashi has 3 pieces. It has the base, which is basically a bucket with a spout, and then it has this tray with holes in it, and that basically filters any kind of liquid into the bottom. So as the liquid filters down, you basically can, as you can see here, there's a little spout, and you can drain that and use it as fertilizer. So then all you do is, this is one of the Bokashi brands that I've used in the past, and then put your food scraps just like this. You sprinkle it right on top of it, and then you want to take all the air out of it. In just a second, my toddler will be talking about how compost is gross, and I thought it was kind of cute, so I'll leave it in.
Ew. Yucky.
Compost is yucky?
Yeah.
So yeah, you just press it all out, and then you put the lid on, and keep doing that until it's full, all the way to the top. Alright, I need the lid. Alright, so we have our Bokashi compost that has been sitting for over a month, so it's been a minute. And what I've done is I just removed all the plants from this on-leg garden bed, and the soil is very, very old. It's been a minute since I've done anything to amend it, so I thought it would be a perfect place to bury Bokashi compost, and I've actually done it in this bed before, and it worked out. So what I did was I removed a lot of the really clumpy, really dry soil, and I'm gonna break that up and revive it for my raised beds. But I need some space for the Bokashi, and then I'm going to put some fresh soil on top. So I made like a little divot here, and let's see what this looks like. I haven't seen it for 2 months. Oh yeah, okay. So sorry if that's gross for anybody, but yeah, it does have some mold, but that's actually totally fine. I hope so. And yeah, because you know, eventually it's going to mold anyway. So you really only have to leave this for 2 weeks. I left it for maybe a month and a half, so it's been a minute. So yeah, I'm gonna dump this into there. Let me see if I can film myself without getting it gross, and then we'll bury it. Okay, so somehow I lost the footage of me putting this in and burying it, but all I did was dump it in and top it off with soil and then wait 2 weeks. Hey guys, so it's about 2 weeks later, and I am digging up my compost, the Bokashi that's in this garden bed right here. And I wanted to show you all what it looks like. So I already kind of dug around in here, and really gross. Well, it's not actually gross, it just looks gross. It's still gross. I found a bunch of black soldier fly larvae, which sounds really gross. So black soldier fly is a really common bug. It doesn't look like a fly, it looks more like kind of like a wasp. And they're totally harmless, and they actually are really beneficial for your compost. From everything I've read, that is what it says. They're beneficial for your compost. Sorry, this straw flower is in the way, but it's so nice. It's going to seed. So anyways, sorry, I get distracted. So black soldier fly larva is really common in your compost. It's going to happen if you have a compost bin, most likely. And they look really gross. They look like little larvae, kind of. They're kind of big. They're like this, and I'm not going to show them to you unless I see one digging around. So what I did was I just dug out the part that most of them were in, and I'm going to throw that in my compost bin. And if I had chickens, I would give it to the chickens because they're very healthy for chickens. People actually buy the larva, black soldier fly larva, and feed it to their chickens. So if I had chickens, I would give them those, but I don't. The other thing I'm going to show you, let me turn you around. All right, so I've been digging around in here for a minute. I've got my stuff with the black soldier fly larva. And basically what's not broken down is stuff that's typically not going to be broken down, no matter what. This is an avocado pit. These are avocado peels. Those take forever to break down. And then this is a cup, it's supposed to be a home compostable cup. Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna put all this stuff in my compost bin. I pretty much always have to just sift through and get all the avocado peels and just throw them back in, because they will eventually break down, but it just takes a lot longer. This, I'm not sure. This is like was supposed to be like a compostable cheese wrapper. And you guys are like, why do you remember all this stuff? Well, I don't know. And then this is a mango pit. So I'm gonna put all this stuff in my composter, but you can see a couple of the black soldier fly larvae. Sorry if you're grossed out by bugs. But the rest of it actually broke down really well. So as you can see, this was all food scrap. There's a date pit right there. I'm just gonna leave that in there. It's not gonna harm anything. It's not gonna grow, but it's just not gonna break down. So as you can see, sorry, the lighting's a little weird. Sorry, it wouldn't focus. So I'm gonna mix this in a little bit into the bed, and then I'm gonna plant my garlic in here. So that's pretty much that on Bokashi. I'll just do a quick wrap up, and yeah, overall that's how it goes. And I'll talk about some of the pros and cons. There's another mango pit. We eat a lot of mangoes, so but yeah, that's what it looks like when it's done. I've dug to the very bottom, and that's all there is. So yeah, it broke down really fast, much quicker than like traditional composting. I hope you all enjoy this video, and if you liked it, please subscribe and like it, and give me a comment. Let me know if you've ever tried Bokashi composting, or if you think it's something that you would like to do in the future. Hope you have a great day.